Welcome to Trash Talk, a podcast by Zero Waste Canada. I'm your host, Alistair McCall. I moved to Canada in 2017 from England, and I've since held a variety of roles in the waste industry, and currently sit on the Zero Waste Canada board. On this podcast, we will dive deep into the world of zero waste and the circular economy, speaking with change makers who are helping to lead us to a more waste-free, sustainable planet. Okay, Trash Talk is back for November. We're joined this month by Christa Clay from Debrand. Welcome, Christa.
Good to be here.
So what's your kind of background and your role at Debrand? Give us the lowdown.
Yeah, I actually moved to Vancouver 2018, having much more of a focus on urban food systems and food systems in general. Not to get too deep into the weeds of it, I went to grad school at Emily Carr with the intention of focusing on food systems and quickly was introduced to the idea of circular economy and the network of circular businesses in Vancouver and had the opportunity to work with a lot of them, some of them which were featured on your podcast, which was nice to see. I worked with Recycling Alternative and Sharewares and Chop Value and was able to work at the end of my time at Emily Carr with the City of Vancouver and the Vancouver Economic Commission on a circular food program, which was helping food businesses mitigate wasted food in their operations, which led to me working with the Vancouver Economic Commission on the circular economy team. And that's really what gave me a lot of understanding of the circular business community and ecosystem in the city of Vancouver, which I know you're also quite familiar with. And Debrand is a member of that community. So before I was very familiar with Debrand, was operating at much more of a systems level,
Yeah.
working with provincial, federal government, and municipal government on the circular economy strategies for all of those regions in small ways, and getting familiar with some of the legislation and policy and trying to support the growth of Vancouver's circular economy in general through its business community. And then when the VEC, the Vancouver Economic Commission, was decommissioned by the city at the end of 2023, I knocked on Debrand's door and kind of cornered Amelia, which is our co-founder and CEO, at a conference and talked to them about what's going on. And that's kind of how I became a bit more familiar with Debrand and ultimately how I ended up joining the team last year.
Amazing. Yeah. Can you give us the kind of background to Debrand, kind of where it started and its growth in Canada and now the US?
Yeah, so Debrand started in Vancouver 18 years ago and started more focused on trying to prevent a lot of waste from events, like a lot of signage and marketing materials that were used one time, and quickly started to grow into the textile space, understanding the need for this and understanding the problem. And there's a lot of information on our website and content into our growth, kind of in a more detailed sense. But Amelia and Wes, our co-founders, really saw an opportunity to address this issue and to also partner with brands, which is our big business strategy really, is to partner directly with brands who are producing these materials, who own these materials, to find a good solution for things that are at risk of becoming waste or at risk of ending up in landfill. And from Vancouver, our hometown in a sense, though now we're based in Surrey, not quite in downtown anymore. We partnered with WM, who's our strategic investor, and we were operating in the States to support a lot of operations with brands we work with that have distribution centers and storefronts in the States.
Yep.
And before we had our US facility, we were already operating in the US and Canada. And last year in July, we opened up our first American facility in Delaware, Ohio, which is just outside of Columbus. So the facility is just over a year old. Our our facility in Surrey is also only about 2 years old. We've moved around a couple of times as we've continued to grow. So the
Yeah.
warehouse operations continue to get more sophisticated. Our tech continues to grow. But yeah, from a small team, it's pretty incredible to kind of see what's been built over the last 18 years by Amelia and Wes.
Yeah, it's great to hear. Yeah, awesome that you're expanding and you're growing as a company. Yeah. Can you give us some examples of any like projects you're working on currently and any brands and then kind of what the impact is you're having with those companies and those brands?
Yeah, when I first joined Debrand last year, I came in as a project manager and I was focused on making sure everything happened essentially. So
Yep.
our traditional model is that we work with brands, a number of which are in based in the US and Canada or Canadian or American companies. Lululemon is one of our largest clients. Everlane is one of our largest clients. There's a lot of them that have built us up and we partnered with over the years
Mm,
they send us product for whatever reason they can't sell in their current operations. So it's damage returns or it's overstock or it's a factory defect. There's kind of a massive list of anything that could be the case with this material. And we sort it for its next best life and work with the brand to develop a program that meets their needs and also creates a more circular solution for that product. So I'm quite familiar with the Everlane program. It's one I used to manage, and now my role is more on, we call it the solutions team. So we work with anybody we send material to. So from the recycling side all the way to reuse and repair and upcycling, all that good stuff. So with Everlane, it's a program where I used to manage, and now I'm working with some of our reuse and resale partners to send product to. And that's been a program that's been really impactful for Everlane as a brand and created more opportunity for them to continue to grow their sustainability efforts. I know something that our company is known for, and I'm quite proud of as an employee of Dbrand, is we have really strong data integrity and
mm.
integrity, quality, sortation. Our communication is very strong in the industry. And this is something that I think has really differentiated us as a company over time is our ability to provide transparency, clean data, and good visibility in general to the companies on what product that they're sending to us and where it's going and having a lot of autonomy over that.
Yeah, data is key. Yeah, based on like my day-to-day work, companies that are seeing data as yeah like valuable, obviously. So, getting good numbers on what they're doing ESG wise is a huge push for that, at least on waste, because that's kind of behind the times, let's say, in accuracy. So yeah, having that kind of good data reporting piece definitely is a yeah key for companies that I'm seeing it in my job as well to report on. So good to hear you're doing a good job on that front as well. Could you walk through like what happens once you receive a batch of clothing, let's say, and then what the end stages of that? Where does it go and how is it reused?
It really depends on the program. I know it
Yeah.
sounds like a bit of a non-answer, but each project or program is very different based off what the brand needs and what the material or the product is. If
Yeah.
it's scraps or if it's finished garments, if it's pre-consumer, post-consumer. So essentially, we're a sorter. It's not that fancy. Our tech and our the work we do has gotten a lot more sophisticated and it's very important work. I mean, essentially, we're trying to get the right stuff to the right people. We need to get the goods where they need to go. So we sort based off what the brand and client need and what the partner needs. It's kind of a combination
Mm.
of those two things. So for
Yeah.
Everlane, we sort their product for reuse. We have a quality standard that we work with our partners and our teams to really hone in on so that they know what quality condition goods they're getting. But we're also sorting for responsible disposal, for fiber reclamation, sometimes for repair for advanced recycling, which is more fiber intensive. So it really depends on what the brand is looking for and what solutions are available as well.
Yeah, it's good to hear that your process like does everything to avoid landfill, which is great. So there's reuse and so on. There's different kind of streams that things fit in before if things have to go to landfill. There's different like, levels you're going through to make sure that's avoided where possible, which is yeah, great to hear. Let's kind of speak about the rise in fast fashion then. So what can companies do to meet consumer demand and be affordable while, keeping clothes in circulation? And why do you think this fast fashion trend is becoming so popular?
I I look at a lot of the data on affordability and cost of goods in general, and I think this has been going around for a little while lately, but the cost of clothing has gotten cheaper over the course of time, unlike the cost of housing and food and a lot of other goods and services. I think it's really access to cheap clothing that has enabled the rise of fast fashion in the way that we've seen it. I'm also, of course, seeing a bit of pushback with Gen Z, and there's a bit of maybe the tide is changing, or maybe I'm just a little overly optimistic, but I think it's been increased access and cheaper goods and manufacturing, some, of course, import loopholes they're well used for the time that they were able to be used. Though it's hard for me to imagine what some of those fast fashion companies' models would look like if they were trying to be more circular, because
Mm,
they're designed on a linear model. And if you're looking at the resale value of an $8 shirt, if it's being sorted, cleaned, handled, and then hung back on a shelf, it's oftentimes not valued at the level it would be worth even putting through the process. So I think there's a fine balance of what is resellable, what's not resellable, what we do with the volume of goods that we have in the market already, and how do we focus our efforts towards creating the best case scenario for the product that we have in the market already.
mm.
Ultimately, it's my opinion that we have enough clothing for ever
Yeah.
that already exists on this planet. And we work with brands that are trying to both continue their business model and also do the right thing with what they have. And it's a sweet spot. And there's always more legislation coming, and there's more accountability, and there's more technology emerging. So there's a lot that brands can do if they're trying to create better systems. And soon enough, depending on where they're operating, they'll be required to be doing some of those things in a way they haven't been before because of some upcoming legislation. Though something we encounter a lot is brands coming to us just asking what's possible with what they have. And I think one of the biggest challenges is a lot of brands operate in a model where their product is distributed somewhere else, manufactured in this one place, and it's sometimes hard for sustainability teams to have a real visibility to where their product is and some information about it. So I think ultimately you have to know what you have, and you have to know where things are kind of falling through the cracks, and to ask hard questions to get into the weeds of some of those departments, because oftentimes and I'm not on our team that works directly with brands for the most part. I'm, like I mentioned, I'm working more with our partners we
Yeah.
send product to, but it's common for our sales team and our account managers to feel like they're really introducing departments to departments and asking people to talk to each other, because it's pretty dispersed, especially in larger corporations, to sometimes try to figure out how to get the right people in the room to make some of those decisions. So I
Mm,
think it is asking the right questions, figuring out what your goals are. Is it landfill diversion? Is it trying to partner with organizations that are testing new technology, or doing collaborations with the designers for upcycling? What are some of those things? What are you looking at for your consumer base or your sustainability targets? And then just to get the right people in the room and ask the right questions.
mm. You mentioned two great things there. The first one about there's like clothes in circulation to meet demands, and just a personal case study. My 3-month-old daughter, we were given like crates and crates of used baby clothing from like friends and family. So yeah, that's been great for us, like being zero waste minded in my household, thanks to myself. It's great to have, that kind of yeah, small closed circle of yeah, being given clothing that we can then use and then pass on again to the next baby and so on. Um, and yeah, she was born at almost 10 pounds, so we kind of skipped the newborn and straight to the 3-month-old. So then we got even more clothing like quickly on after she was born. So yeah, it's great to kind of see that, yeah, circular textiles in our household recently. You mentioned too about upcoming changes to laws on clothing and companies. So could you expand more on that and what that may mean for brands in the near future?
Yeah, a lot of brands that we work with, and I think brands in general that are operating in the EU and in the States, are familiar to an extent of some of this upcoming legislation. And I'm not it's not my primary focus at the company to be in the weeds of the constant updates and changes that are happening. There was a law passed in California, SB 707, that's the most upcoming and will take a lot of time to come into effect, but it's the first ripple effect of extended producer responsibility legislation coming into effect in Europe, and we're seeing it kind of trickle down into the States, and there's many other states that are starting to test out what this looks like. And I think everyone has a lot of questions of what it will look like in actuality, depending on who ends up running the backbone of that program. But ultimately, a lot of brands are trying to ask us as folks in the industry as well, what does that mean for them if they distribute or sell product in California or in other regions? So there's, for the most part, brands we're working with have folks that are dedicated to this to stay, have their finger on the pulse of all of these changes. And so I think if it's not something that you're familiar with and you're operating in those regions, you should be. In Canada specifically, we don't have any extended producer responsibility legislation for textiles right now. The
Mm.
way that textiles are being tracked for the most part, from my understanding in Canada, is if they have plastic in the textiles, then that's being tracked. But textiles as a category otherwise isn't a big focus for the Canadian government right now, not for Environment Climate Change Canada, at least not so far that they would have legislation around it quite yet. Though I know it's percolating in North America, and I think everyone's watching to see what's going to happen in California and New York and a lot of other places. So I think there's more questions than answers about what that's going to look like, but a lot of brands are trying to equip themselves so that when and if that happens, they're not in a position where they can't comply with legislation.
Mm.
So we're working with a lot of legislative groups and with brands to try to figure out what that looks like. And it's going to be a big collaborative effort, and grateful to have really strong partners in the industry as we kind of figure this all out together.
Yeah, awesome. Is there anything that you would change in like current regulations and so on that you're seeing as a big gap that could, help the brand and the clients work together like more cohesively or make brands kind of, do more? Anything you would like point out as, if you could change one regulation or add something new into the regulations, what would you kind of personally want to see?
I really struggle with that question sometimes, and what's one thing I would really change. But one thing I would love to see, and I'm not sure how this would be regulated, is if brands were required to have a certain percentage of their revenue coming from circular models.
Hmm.
Something I've been noticing is a number of companies that are spearheading, or maybe not spearheading, but trying to build out secondhand marketplaces or reuse programs, and I'm not really specifically talking about the ones that we partner with very closely, but they're building these programs as a means of generating additional revenue, of course, though very few of them, if any, really in North America are growing those programs to replace revenue generated from virgin goods and services.
Hmm.
And I know the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has been building programs to not pressure, but challenge brands and work with them to understand what that shift in model would look like. And so I think for the time being, a lot of companies are working really hard to do the right thing and excited to work with them and figure out what that looks like. And also would love to see what a version of this looks like that's, instead of creating more revenue from one, is also trying to look to change the course of what the textile ecosystem looks like in general, and encouraging them to increasingly invest in these programs as they can generate revenue when they're done correctly and when they're done in collaboration with other folks in the industry.
Yeah.
So that would be my one thing I would change.
Yeah, no, good points. Yeah. Yeah, closing off here. So what would you say to listeners to encourage them to, choose more eco-friendly clothing options if they had the choice, that kind of fast fashion, like cheaper clothing? What would you say to them to kind of reconsider maybe or look at shifting their habits to more circular kind of fashion brands?
It's a bit of an older school notion. I guess I feel a lot like I'm saying maybe the same thing a lot of folks would say, but I think in general, just wearing your clothes for as long as possible. most sustainable closet you have is the one you already have.
Yep.
Though there's a lot of ways to continue to extend the life of clothing by repair, by having clothing swaps in your community. I know there's a number of them in the city of Vancouver that are hosted by a number of groups. Um, Buying secondhand, of course, as well is a big one. I I know I really try to extend the life of what the clothing that I have as long as possible and selectively choose if I'm going to be bringing something into my closet. But I think I grew up in North America and going to buy large bulk clothing for school every year. And I feel like it's taken a long time for me to train my brain out of the fact that I don't need to have new clothing all the time and pushing myself to reimagine certain pieces that have been hanging in my closet for a long time. And so that's been a practice I've been working on lately and trying to put my stylist hat on, which I am not, to try to be more creative about the things that are already hanging in my closet or sharing them with my friends. I know wedding season, we always try to share shared clothing and be a bit more thoughtful about that because if you're in a community of folks, you likely have a lot of options if you're just open about it.
Yeah, like from what I have seen, there's, trending upwards in terms of, thrift stores, vintage shopping, consignment seems to be like popular as well. So there are options, like you're saying, out there for kind of circulating clothes. So yeah, I mean, hopefully those things continue to trend upwards and yeah, more brands kind of, get involved with Debrand and there's a more circular fashion industry laying ahead, but there's great work being done, like you mentioned earlier. So yeah, thanks for your time today, Krista. Great to speak to you and learn more about what you're doing and the work at Debrand.
Thanks so much.